Hello, fellow niggers, fellow anonymous. This is a little analysis on the game which has recently finished between 4chan's board B playing against the computer of the chess.com website. And well, it was an interesting game with some tactical points that maybe it would be interesting for us to analyze. And also, if no one ends up seeing this video, at least I would have trained a little bit in my English speech, because well, English is not my first language. So let's begin. Okay, so B is playing the white pieces, and the chess.com machine is playing the black pieces. So 4chan starts with d4, queen's pawn opening, and knight f6, which is known as the Indian defense, or the beginning of the Indian defenses, which is by far the most common reply to pawn to d4, because it's a very flexible move, allows for pretty much a lot of different defenses and openings, which derive from the d4 opening. So c4, very common move, trying to gain control of the central squares and gaining some time, a little bit of initiative on the queen side part of the board. So now pawn to e6, which liberates the bishop. If the bishop is liberated, then the king and the rook can castle. And also, if white decides to play something like knight c3, trying to gain a little bit more of control over g5 and e4, well, we can arise to the Nimzovich defense, the Nimzo-Indian defense, which pretty much which pretty much sees a lot of dynamic play from black, a lot of dynamic play from white too, but it's considered a little bit of a sharp opening. So 4chan decides to play knight to f3, which now of course black can still play bishop to b4, gaining a tempo because it's checking the king, but it's a little bit of a different opening. It's called the Bogo-Indian opening, named after Yefim Boguljubov, a very famous player from 1940s. And now, of course, a move like bishop takes and let's say queen takes is kind of possible. But after knight f3, the computer decides to play b6, which starts the queen's Indian defense. Another very solid opening for black, which it's very popular after this third move from white, knight f3. Of course, the plan for black is now to fianchetto this bishop, and to also start to play something like bishop a6 in some point, to start to accelerate some pressure on this pawn on c4. So now pawn to e3, which is not the most common move in this position, but it's still a very solid move, trying to put another defender on d4, and also liberating this light square bishop. So now bishop to b7, like we already said. The idea is to fianchetto this bishop, which means to put the bishop in the most long diagonal, which goes from this point a8 to h1. So the bishop is in a very cozy space, but at the same time is pointing at very far away in the white position. So now knight c3. And now a very uncommon move, which is bishop to f3, which kinda of negates black's own plan, because this bishop was very important for black. It was well, again, in a very cozy space, but it was also pointing down at the possible white kingside castle, because if we have like these bishop moves and then the king castles, then this bishop is freely pointing at this very sensitive square, which is G2. But now that the bishop is gone, well, black is going to start to have a little bit of problems, especially against this rook in A8, because it's now being attacked by the queen, and it forces the move knight c6, which blocks the attack. But now I still believe that this was a bad move, because now all of the white squares in black position are going to be attacked with much more freedom from white. Now bishop to d3, which may not have been the best move. Again, black makes another mistake, which is bishop to b4. Now, if bishop to d3, I believe that the best continuation for black it's knight to b4, because it now attacks the unprotected bishop, but it also attacks a very sensitive square, which is c2. If, for example, we have something like, I don't know, bishop to e2, then this move comes, knight to c2, attacking both the king and the rook, and well, white is going to have some trouble getting the rook back, and well, it's not a very pleasant position. And again, maybe a move like bishop to b1 has to be played in order to keep the bishop in this very strong diagonal, and also keeping an eye on the c2 square, so the knight cannot come here. But well, knight to b4 wasn't played by black, and instead bishop to b4 was played, pinning the knight to the king, which is behind, so the knight cannot move. And Fortran decides to interrupt this pin immediately, so the king can now move freely, and the knight now can move freely. So both sides castle. Black decides to go for a king side, and Fortran decides to go for a very a much more aggressive queen side castle, because now both rooks can come to these columns, which are directly pointing to the black king. So now d5 by black, which tries to simplificate the position a little bit, especially if we have something like c takes d5, which is not good, because knight takes d5 comes, and now this knight is very strong. And if we have knight takes, we can have something like, I don't know, bishop takes, rook takes, queen takes, and now the position has, it has simplified a lot, which in the long run will benefit black a lot, because the king is now exposed to this, very difficult C column. So after d5, Fortran decides to play rook e1, deciding to get a little bit of control from the center. And if black decides to capture, we may have something like this, and these two pawns can start rolling forward at some point. Although after captures, you can also have this type of sacrifices, which are kind of annoying, because after black takes, white has the free knight on c6. But moving forward, we have after rook he1, we have rook to e8, and now we have the bishop moving back to c2. So now, of course, this is impossible because the knight is hanging. So we have knight a5, putting a double attacker on the c4 pawn, which Fortran decides to exchange. So we have a little exchange in pawns, and now this rook it's kind of extremely bearing down the white position, especially because it is already open, it has a lot of potential. What this rook still has kind of this pawn pretty much stopping this rook from entering the game. So e4 follows, so Fortran decides to open the center, and d takes e4, bishop takes e4, which is a very good intermezzo move, because now the queen cannot take, because the rook at the corner hangs. So after bishop takes, knight takes, and now rook takes protects the d4 pawn, so the queen cannot take. And now bishop to e7. If we had something like a bishop to c3, I believe that an exchange of rooks right now, it's not very good for black, because this rook is still in the corner. It still needs some moves to get out of there, while this rook, from d1 it can go to e1 and be completely active in just one move. So bishop to e7, rook of d to e1, and now a very bad move for black, I believe, which is king to f8. Now if something like c3 could have been better, but the problem now with king f8 is that something like for example a queen f5 is extremely dangerous for black, because the pawn now in h7 hangs, and if the pawn hangs, then we have a lot of mate threats. For example, if black plays a passive move, then queen takes h7, and now we are threatening mate in h8. So, but the king has no escape, because if the king tries to liberate a square to flee, well, still it's checkmate, because the rook it's covering this important e7 square. So queen f5 is a very strong move in this position. But Fortran does not see this move, and instead plays knight to b1. I'm not sure exactly what this move, the purpose of this move, but well, what are you gonna do? You're playing with a lot of with a collective of people, and they chose this move. So knight to b1, knight to c6, relocating the knight. Now the knight is defending the bishop, which was kind of a pinned, because if for example the bishop moves right now, then rook takes, checking both the king and the queen, so the queen ends up being lost in this position, and in fact the other rook, it's also lost. So the bishop was kind of a pin. So now that the knight moves, well, it protects the bishop a little bit. Another move excuse me. So now queen h3, with the idea again of playing against this h7 pawn. So the king moves back to defend it, and now a very a not so good move, which is bishop to c3. The idea, I believe, is that at some time move this pawn to d5 and exert some pressure along the g7 line. But the problem is that now black has this move, which is bishop g5, checking the white king, so gaining a tempo, and after the king moves, black liberates a little bit of the pressure it had. So instead, after bishop c3, black did not see this move, so it played queen to d5, and now we have a little bit of repetition with queen h4 and queen d7. Of course, the idea is a little trap, because of course the the bishop cannot take the queen because it's a very well a very classical mate with the back rank rook. So we have queen to h4, queen to d7, protecting the bishop, and now the queen moves back to the third rank. Now it's in g3. So we have the queen again going to d5, knight d2, rook a c8, which are pretty much relocating moves. Rook g4 with the idea of making a little battery against this g7 pawn. So we have g6. So now the pawn is still pinned, but it's not longer under attack. Queen f3, offering a queen exchange which black accepts. And now we have again this move, knight to b4, with the idea of getting a little bit aggressive, with this knight to d3, forking the queen, forking the king and the rook, and also attacking this a2 pawn. So white is forced to take. So we have this exchange, and now instead of just exchanging rooks, 4chan decides to play I believe a very good move, which is rook to e5. The idea is that after rook takes, now the knight gets a very good space, a very good outpost from which it can attack a lot of important squares. So now, and also it's threatening, for example, now knight c6, which attacks both the bishop and the h7 pawn. So rook e8, exerting some pressure on the knight, and also after the knight moves, for example, you can have a very vicious check here with rook e1, and well, it's going to be a little bit nasty. For example, if we have I don't know, the knight moves to some square, like for example knight to c6. Now the rook comes crashing down, and after the king moves, it's going to be a little bit of a different fight, that a little bit different fight from which white would have loved to have. So, and well, we have the rook in e8, and now a move which looks bad, but it's actually a very good move, which is rook to e4. From here, you should know what could have happened if for example, bishop to d6, which is, I believe, the best move in the position. But well, black did not play it here. He played pawn to f6, which after knight to d7 pretty much seals the deal, seals the game for white, because now black is forced to take. And after this fork, which with knight takes f6 check, it checks both the king and the rook. So we have now a winning game for black, for white, with white being up a pawn. So now a very good move again, which is d5, cutting the king from going forward with because it's covering the both squares that the king could have used to go forward. So white offers black offers a piece exchange, which ends up being beneficial for white, because after f4, again the king is completely cut off. So the white king starts being more centrified, and now the position is pretty much won for white. So thanks for seeing this game. Excuse me for my very broken and bad foreign English, but well, at least I tried. I do more of analysis in Spanish language. So thanks for watching.